Louise Walsh had always believed in family. She had spent years giving back, helping her parents whenever they needed financial support, never once questioning whether it was fair or if they even appreciated it. But tonight, standing in the middle of the cozy living room of their vacation home at Bear Lake, she realized something that made her stomach churn. Her father was shouting, his face red with anger, pacing back and forth across the room. "How could you be so selfish?" he bellowed, his voice sharp like a whip. "Your sister needs that money for her new business venture. You have more than enough." Louise stood frozen, still gripping the property tax bill she had just been handed. She had come here expecting a warm Sunday dinner, but instead, she was being cornered and questioned like a criminal. For years, she had taken on the role of the responsible one. At 33, she had built a career as a self-taught day trader, putting in endless hours, suffering sleepless nights, and making sacrifices most people wouldn't even consider. It had been worth it. She had achieved financial stability, something she had worked tirelessly for, but looking around at the faces of her family, she wondered if any of them had ever truly seen the effort behind her success. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Dad, I've been paying for everything for years," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The property taxes, Megan's car payments, Mom's medical bills. I never complained, but I can't keep doing this forever." Her mother sat silently on the couch, staring down at her hands as if they held the answers to all the questions Louise wanted to ask. She wouldn't even look at her, and that stung more than her father's anger. "We gave you everything growing up," her father continued, completely ignoring what she had just said, "and now that we need you, you're abandoning us, while your sister is trying to build a future for herself." That's when Louise's eyes landed on an envelope sitting on the coffee table, a thick white envelope, partially hidden beneath a magazine. Something about it felt off. The words printed on the corner caught her attention. "Trust Fund, Megan Walsh." A sharp pang of unease settled in her chest. She reached for the envelope before her father could stop her. "Louise, that's private," he snapped. But it was too late. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the document inside, scanning the pages quickly. What she saw made her heart plummet. A trust fund, a very large trust fund, specifically for Megan. $350,000, with additional contributions planned for the future. Her breath hitched, the words blurred for a moment as her mind reeled. All those years of her father saying money was tight. All those times she had struggled through college without help, working 2 jobs just to get by. And yet, all along, there had been plenty of money, just not for her. She looked up, meeting her father's gaze. "When were you going to tell me about this?" He exhaled sharply, snatching the papers from her hands, but the damage was already done. She knew the truth now. The favoritism, the way Megan was always treated like something fragile, needing special attention, while Louise was expected to be independent, to figure things out on her own. She had always assumed it was just how things were, that maybe their parents had been in a different financial situation when she was younger, but now, she saw the reality with blinding clarity. They had never planned to support her, only Megan. "Sweetheart," her mother finally spoke, her voice soft, placating, almost pleading. "Your sister needs more help than you do. You've always been so strong, so capable. We're so proud of how well you've done." Louise let out a bitter laugh. "So because I worked hard and didn't ask for anything, I get nothing? And Megan, who's never had to struggle a day in her life, gets a small fortune handed to her?" Her father folded his arms. "It's not that simple. We had to think about the future." "Just not my future," she cut in. She thought about all the times she had paid for things without a second thought. The property taxes alone were $8,700 a year. She had covered them for 5 years. On top of that, she had taken care of Megan's car payments, their mother's medical bills, and even paid for the new roof on this very vacation home, $12,000 straight from her savings. And yet, even after everything, her father still pushed the property tax bill toward her. "The taxes are due next month, and the HOA fees went up again." Louise stared at him, disbelief washing over her like a wave. After everything she just discovered, he still expected her to pay? The audacity was staggering. Something inside her hardened. She picked up the bill and folded it neatly. "I'll take care of it," she said quietly. Her father's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if he had one. He didn't notice the finality in her voice. The drive back to her apartment in downtown Salt Lake City felt different this time. The familiar snow-capped mountains no longer seemed comforting. Instead, they loomed, dark and unyielding, mirroring the storm inside her. Once home, she ignored the ringing phone. She knew it was her father, probably checking to make sure she wouldn't back out of paying, but she had something more important to do. She pulled out her laptop and opened a folder labeled Financial Contributions, Family. She had kept a record of every dollar she had spent on them over the years. She never thought she'd need it, but now, looking at the numbers, she felt sick. 5 years of property taxes, $43,500. Megan's car payments, $11,168. Vacation home roof repair, $12,000. Mom's medical bills, $8,200. Family vacations she had funded, $22,400. Total, $118,745. She stared at the figure, over $100,000. And while she had been draining her own resources for them, they had been secretly building a nest egg for Megan. Something inside her snapped into place. She wouldn't do this anymore. Not one more dollar, not one more favor. She had given enough. She clicked on a new document and began drafting an email. Subject, Financial Boundaries. She would send it in the morning, and for the first time in years, she would finally put herself first. Because family or not, she was done being used. I sat across from my sister, keeping my voice calm as I asked, "Why? What's your problem?" Megan crossed her arms, her expression a mix of anger and frustration. The problem? The problem is that I've contributed almost $120,000 to this family over the last 5 years while Dad has been secretly putting money into a trust fund for you. At first, Megan looked surprised. Then guilt flashed across her face, but it quickly turned into defensive anger. "That's different," she insisted. "The trust is for my future. I need that security. And I don't?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "You've always been the smart one," she said, as if that explained everything. "You have your fancy trading career. I'm still trying to figure things out. At 31, Megan? While I pay your car payments and cover family vacations?" She flushed but lifted her chin. "You've never complained before." "Because I didn't know I was being manipulated," I shot back. "I didn't know that while I was draining my savings to support the family, Dad was stashing away money just for you." "It's not that much money," she mumbled. I let out a dry laugh. $350,000 is a significant amount. Her eyes widened. "How do you know the exact?" I saw the document. A long silence stretched between us before Megan reached for my arm, her voice suddenly softer. "Look, Louise, I understand you're upset, but we're family. We need your help. Dad says that without your support, they might lose the lake house." I stepped back, breaking her touch. "That's not my problem anymore." Her mouth fell open. "You'd let them lose the vacation home where we spend our summers? How can you be so cold?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She had always been taken care of, always been given whatever she needed. And now she couldn't understand why I would stop. "They have options," I said simply. "They could use some of your trust fund." Megan's expression hardened. "That's not fair." I gave her a small, sad smile. "No, Megan. Nothing about this has been fair." And with that, I gently but firmly closed the door in her face. 2 weeks passed, and the property tax deadline came and went. I maintained complete radio silence with my parents and Megan. Instead, I focused on my work and my financial future. Without constantly pouring money into family expenses, my investments grew, and I could finally plan for myself. Joseph, my financial advisor, helped me restructure my portfolio, and for the first time in years, I considered the possibility of buying a vacation home of my own. Then one morning, an email arrived that shattered my newfound peace. Subject, Louise, what's going on? Louise, what's going on with Greg and the lake house? He's asking me for a $10,000 loan to cover property taxes and penalties. Said something about you refusing to help the family anymore. This doesn't sound like you. The message was from Uncle Pete, my father's brother. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. So instead of using Megan's trust fund, my father was now approaching other family members for money. I carefully composed a reply, attaching a PDF summary of my financial contributions over the past 5 years, along with a brief explanation of the trust fund situation. Uncle Pete's response came within the hour. "Holy hell, Louise. I had no idea." No one did. "Greg's been telling everyone how he's struggling to help both his daughters equally. This changes things." The next day, my cousin Thomas called. "Louise, there's something you should know," he said, his voice urgent. "There's a family meeting at your parents' house this weekend. Uncle Greg called it, to discuss your abandonment of the family. He's trying to rally everyone against you." My stomach tightened. "Thanks for telling me. There's more," Thomas added. "I overheard my dad talking to your father. They're planning to guilt you into not just resuming payments, but covering all the late fees and penalties too. They're framing it as you deliberately damaging the family legacy." I let out a slow breath. "Are you going to the meeting?" "Yes. And so are you," Thomas said firmly. "You need to set the record straight." "I'll back you up." I agreed, though anxiety churned in my stomach. Facing my father in front of the entire family would be difficult, but necessary. On Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house dressed in a sharp black pantsuit, carrying a briefcase filled with financial records. The living room fell silent when I walked in. My father stood near the fireplace, mid-speech. Aunts, uncles, and cousins sat around the room, their faces a mix of concern and confusion. Megan sat beside our mother, both looking uneasy. "Louise," my father said smoothly. "I'm glad you're here. We were just discussing the family vacation home." "I'm sure you were," I replied evenly. "And I'm sure you gave everyone all the relevant financial information." His jaw tightened. "We're discussing your refusal to meet family obligations." "Interesting," I said, opening my briefcase. "Because I have 5 years of records showing over $118,000 in family obligations I've already met." Meanwhile, Dad created a $350,000 trust fund exclusively for Megan. A stunned silence followed. "What trust fund?" my Aunt Catherine asked, frowning. I looked at my father, giving him a chance to explain. When he said nothing, I passed copies of the summary document around the room. The reaction was instant: shock, anger, disbelief. My father's face darkened. "These are private family matters." "Exactly," Uncle Pete said, standing up. "And in this family, we should treat our children equally." I hadn't expected this level of support. As the room erupted into debate, my father locked eyes with me. In his gaze, I saw something I had never seen before: fear. And behind it, something else: reluctant respect. 3 days later, my phone lit up with a text from my father. "The property taxes are due. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a demand." That evening, my mother called, her voice hesitant. "Louise, your father isn't handling this well. The lake house means everything to him. More than treating his daughters equally." Her silence was answer enough. The next morning, I texted my father back with a single attachment, a photo of my financial records, with the total circled in red. An hour later, my phone rang. It wasn't my father. It was Megan.